pre-hurricane. It does not look good, JC, for your Miami will be spared, but Tampa.
Listen, I lived through Hurricane Andrew. I remember it very well, and if I had to do it again, I would get the hell out of there. It is not something that it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Yeah, I was just there with Lewis.
That is what it looks like.
I was just
don't be a hero.
Lewis. We had an out. I mean, Lewis, a serious fisherman. Lewis Johnson. He'll be talking. Casey, you and him are going to have some great stories. He lives in Naples. Moved his family there. He was T. Rowe Price before, Baltimore boy, Phil. And we squeezed in an hour on the flats, and dude, I caught a 40-pound tarpon. So
how about that?
And JC, is it upsetting you that no hurricane's ever been named after a Cuban?
I don't know if that's true.
If there was a hurricane and they're going to name it after a Cuban, what would be the most obvious name?
Pepe.
Fidel.
Pepe the hurricane.
Hurricane Pepe. That's
Hurricane Pepe. Yeah.
By the way, that should be a theme song. That should be a chant of the crypto community.
Yeah, Pepe. Probably
not
Pepe.
BTFT, but Hurricane Pepe. All right.
Maybe, I
can't even get through an intro. Okay, we've run out of time.
Thank you, everybody.
Hope everybody enjoyed it and all the new ideas. All right, so joining me from Mumbai, not Mumbai, California, but Mumbai. He's making naan bread as we speak. He's going to pass out some naan bread to everybody. Welcome aboard, StockTwits India. How do you pronounce your name?
It's Yash, Y-A-S-H. Yash.
It's like a Israeli name. I like it. Yeah.
No,
and I love the T-shirt. And I think you're wearing the same size that Phil wears. Is that a children's husky? And then Phil joining us all the way from his basement. Congratulations on the safe commute. And then we've got the AI whisperer, Michael Parekh in Houston. They've been on some hurricanes too. And then somewhere in Amish country, JC Peretz with the.
I wish I was. I honestly wish I was. These Amish folks are fantastic. We don't have any Amish around here. I got no Mexicans. I got no Jews. No Indians. I got nothing. It's I got Dutch and Italians. That's cool. I got so I got to go to the city for that kind of stuff.
Nowhere to charge your phone.
Oh, nowhere to charge your phone. He holds it up at the sun. All right. So we've got a lot of topics today. Phil, what do we got?
Let's get right into it. So, Yash, it's just great to have you here. You are the editor-in-chief of StockTwits India, and you are an expert on the Indian stocks and have been doing that for quite a while. Is that right?
Yeah. So before StockTwits, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just saying that before StockTwits, I was for around 4 years with Bloomberg India. And I had the chance of working with JC as well when he was down in Mumbai for the CMP symposium. So it was great, meeting him. Yeah.
And so you guys were talking Kardashian bottoms, which is a stock pattern. It's a chart pattern. It's nothing perverse. Is that correct, JC?
The Kardashian bottom is simply more like a double bottom-ish rounding bottom, right? So versus a pure, sort of saucer-like formation, to put it in the parlance of an Edwards and McGee, the Kardashian bottom is more of like a dual bowl. Hence the
nomenclature. Do you not use that term as much as you use
the way the kids talk these days?
StockTwits Instagram.
Do you not use that term as much as you used to for sort of social correctness reasons?
No, there just aren't a lot of Kardashian bottoms right now because you're getting a lot of new 52-week highs. The Kardashian bottoms were more like in 2022, completing in 23. You had a ton of those. It's just not that kind of environment right now.
Josh, so professional. Just want you to know.
Yeah, no, it's a great. I mean, it's so classic. I mean, he broke the internet with some of those charts. So, okay, so let's get right into it.
We're going Kardashian bottom. That's what we were talking about in India. And look what happened. They're very explosive resolutions.
So we're going to get right into Indian stocks. We're going to go right into the Nifty chart. We could put that right up. First off, Yash, give us the climate. I mean, look at this thing. I mean, this thing is like freaking God chart. What's going, like what is set the state, the stage for us. Like what's going on in India right now? This is an incredible bull market that's lasted for a long time. Looks like since, maybe 2020 or something like that. What's the
No, so actually it goes much farther than just 2020, right? So we had a big political change up from 2014 with the new government coming in, the Bharatiya Janata Party, and there's been a massive focus on changing and reforms, digitization, and ease of doing business, right? So that's basically the groundwork behind this bull run that we've started seeing from 2014. And post COVID, I think the biggest trigger for markets has been, the retail investors. Just to give you some stats, the number of retail investors has quadrupled in just the last 4 years, and retail investors, the money that they're pouring in is more than offsetting all the selling pressure that we have seen, because we are going to talk about FIIs ditching India and going to China. But while they're selling, there's more and enough gunpowder that the retail investors and the domestic investors have. So yeah, I mean, the biggest factor has been the structural change that has happened with the new government coming in, and the influx of new traders and investors being very consistent with their SIP inflows, being very consistent with their investments.
If I can add a couple of things on this chart, because it's a wonderful chart. The broad context, especially since we've talked about China a lot, India at this point right now represents a $4 trillion economy versus China at 18 plus trillion. India at the beginning of this chart was about 1.1 billion people. Now it's 1.4 plus, just crossed over China. India has a demographic dividend in terms of more people under 40 than most countries, but China is obviously on the way down. So in 50 years, China is going to go to about 800 million. India is going to keep up and to the right. The other thing I would just say from a tech point of view is 2016 on this chart is literally when Jio, and Yash can speak to this, Reliance, which is the big mega telco and conglomerate that controls a lot of social media and so on in India. Jio, the telecom, they own the Jio telecom provider. But that's when they started introducing two things: 4G wireless and flat plans, use plans. And that was basically what took India to over 600, 700 million users online. Yash, you may have a more current number. But the whole chart post 2016, just because I tend to look at things through a tech filter, this is when lots of people started to go online in India in a massive way. So I just wanted to point out those 3 or 4 points.
Yes, absolutely. And Michael, just to add to it, that the fact that they started off with a very aggressive pricing pattern completely disrupted the whole telecom industry. Like it went from having close to 8 to 10 players now down to just 3, one of whom is in a very bad situation, frankly, struggling as well. And yeah, India has one of the lowest data rates in the world, less than $1. In fact, for per GB of data consumption. So that's been one of the biggest reason driving people over on the internet.
And JC, I mean, is there anything not to like about this chart? I mean, is it too far? Does it just keep going up? I mean, what do you see here?
I mean, for me, it's really been kind of a standout in the emerging market space, while things like China, which have been really dominant in terms of size and importance, really have struggled for so long. So the question, really comes up, okay, is India now going to become a source of funds? And is money going to rotate out of India to now overcompensate on the other side with China, right? And I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but I think that's a very valid question from an asset allocation standpoint. When you think about how portfolio managers have been positioned, China was one of the most crowded trades in the whole world, short China. So that unwind is going to be very powerful. And I think it's important to at least question whether or not that's going to affect the Indian market. So I brought together a couple of charts. First of all, you're looking at the small cap India versus large cap India. And this traditionally has been a great indicator for us to really show whether there's more risk appetite out there or risk aversion. If you want to throw that chart up there, you're seeing in the United States, it's not like that. Just because small caps are outperforming the large caps doesn't mean that that's a healthy market. Just because small caps are underperforming large caps, that doesn't mean that it's an unhealthy market. In India, on the other hand, it actually is very indicative of the type of market environment you're in when these small caps, as you can see here, are making new highs relative to large caps. So this divergence that we're looking at right now is at least one to think about, particularly as all this money is rotating into China. The next chart here, as you can see, is the United States relative to China and India relative to China. So you could see that massive correction as money has flown into China, as you can see here, very, very aggressively. In fact, money has rotated into China faster than at any point in the history of Chinese equities. So one would think, is that going to hurt Indian stocks? I think on a relative basis, I think it's fair to expect China outperform India. I'm not so much convinced that it's going to be on a down India on an absolute basis. I would be looking at that small cap, large cap ratio as further evidence of that. That's how I see it.
I got one. About a year ago, we covered this with MMYT. Maybe Ash, you could talk about this. It's one of my been one of my top trades. We talked about it at $40. It was an all-time high breakout. I don't know if we can pull it up. Sorry, Phil, I forgot to mention it. But this is just if you're going to play India, MMYT, which is to make my trip.
Make my trip.
We talked about it. Yeah, and kind of just one of those at base for a decade. As India kind of wandered around. But if you're going to play, just like Booking and even C-Trip in China, which I won't touch, but if you're going to play the growth in India, obviously travel is an incredible play. It has not looked back. So it looks a lot like the India chart, except, this is just a $10 billion company and kind of the only game in town. But you give me some more feedback around what competitors look like there and what you use, Yash.
So one of their listed companies is already there on the Indian Stock Exchange, Ease My Trip. I think across the board, all the travel stocks have done very well, mainly because the post-COVID revenge traveling thing, that's just not stopped at all, right? We're seeing travel season become an all year round thing. So all the hotel stocks, they're doing very, very well. Indian Hotels, one of the largest hotel chains in India, Lemon Tree Hotels, Chalet Hotels, all of them, probably would have a similar chart like Make My Trip at all-time highs.
Yeah, so you can see, look at the way you can see what happens after these long bases or JC. Remember we talked about it in the 40s, and it just has not given anybody an entry, and that's kind of what China looked like for about 2 weeks coming out of a bottom. But Make My Trip was more a break to all-time highs, so that's why I thought it was interesting at the time. Okay, that's obviously, I don't have deep takes on India, so we're lucky to have Yash and the whole Indian team. I mean, we're one of the largest social.
I just wanted to add one more thing to JC's point on this. On the fundamental side, the other thing to keep in mind about India is that they're obviously a beneficiary in terms of U.S. and Western company investment in across the board, especially from a reshoring of the supply chain around China that's going on because of the US-China geopolitical stuff. Apple's now making over 15% of its iPhones in India. Foxconn, all of those companies are building extraordinary amounts of infrastructure for US and European companies. And so, and FDI flows, Yash, you may have more recent numbers or updated numbers, but FDI flows generally have been relatively positive. They were. My sense is they were in abeyance ahead of the big election, where the post-election, where it looked like there was more of a coalition set up in India. It seems that the FDI flows have a little bit more comfort level to be long term again on India relative to China, especially around the reshoring of supply chain arguments.
So. Since you were at Goldman and during the U.S. first internet boom, what did that look like in India?
India at the time was in the 90s was
Yeah,
like
let's
China.
talk about so
They were
people have
both-
some context.
Yes,
Mike,
so they were both viewed as the mega emerging markets. It was very unclear how it would play out. There was a lot of emerging market interest investment in India. I remember spending a number of times in India. I was born there, but I've grown up. I've been mostly in the U.S. But in the 90s for Goldman, I spent a lot of time in India looking at the emerging internet market. India and China both leaped over the last 25 years. They've leaped over the rest of the world primarily because they didn't have to have a PC cycle like the US did. They went directly to mobile, and that happened anyway. So India was very much an emerging market, just like China. And then China, obviously, once they joined the WTO, got to where China is today and never looked back. India is now fast in the race.
And what's yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what is it like not having TikTok? Like, what as a consumer, and then Michael as someone who had to deal with this from an analyst side of if the government here did something to TikTok and banned it. Let's just talk through what it's like in India and what's replaced it, and if anything, and how people go around and if TikTok's so popular everywhere else, what do Indians use? And then Mike,
India ironically banned TikTok already.
Right.
Yash talked about that. I was in India in February, and it was just drove me nuts because I have an half an hour a day habit. I couldn't access TikTok, and that's because of the U.S. India China geopolitical issues. They have almost a
Correct.
little skirmish.
So who did that help? Who did that hurt? Do you think, Yash and Michael? Who did that help? Who did that hurt?
I think it only hurt the Chinese, right? Because we completely moved away from TikTok, and Instagram Reels is extremely popular. So if you look at all the stats, Instagram is the most used social media platform in India, and Zuckerberg has a history of copying stuff from all the competitors and scaling it at a far higher level. And Instagram Reels is exactly what you would say TikTok is for you. Like, people are obsessed with short form content, and there's been a huge surge of creators, right? Because like Michael said, free data, cheap data has been available to everybody. 4G smartphone and our 4G enabled smartphones are readily available at a very cheap cost, whether it's from the Chinese manufacturers or whether it is your Samsung and Apple these days. Like Michael said, it's manufacturing phones in India. So it's become very easy nowadays to become a content creator. And if not for TikTok, then there is still Instagram Reels, which is killing it, as well as YouTube. Yeah, so I think for Indians, it's more Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts than TikTok.
And also,
I mean, that's the big news. I mean, they don't monetize well, right? Like we know from StockTwits, it's social media in India, people don't pay.
WhatsApp is the 1 billion people property at Zuck at Meta, which is the least monetized. But over the next 10 years, it's a huge asset for Meta and Zuck, and they know it. In fact, the Meta AI, which we talked about a couple of shows ago, which is Meta's version of ChatGPT, it's got the biggest traction on WhatsApp relative to Facebook and Instagram. Out of 3 properties, 3 billion across. WhatsApp is seeing much better traction on AI usage on Meta's Llama than any of the other platforms.
Wow. And then life in Mumbai, Yash, what's it like for a young person? Trading?
It must be a lot of fun. Mumbai's a blast.
It's wonderful. But anyway, I'll let him talk because I love Mumbai.
What's it like, kid?
It's good. It's fun. I mean, Bombay has the best nightlife, so you get to go to all the best happening parties in town. And yeah, I mean, trading obviously has been a part of Mumbai, because we have the BSC and the NSE, the two main exchanges in Bombay. But yeah, it's got great views, it's got great sites, it's got great parties. So yeah, just great being in Bombay. Probably the best city, I would say. I mean, I'm biased because I've been born and brought up in India, in Bombay. So my favorite city has to be Mumbai.
I like the fact that you call it Bombay and not Mumbai. I still have an issue on that. And Howard, next time we're there, masala falafel, some of the best in Mumbai.
I think we'll have to do a Oktoberfest Bombay. I like the term Bombay too. It was like, it's way back from like I Dream of Jeannie and other things. The guy who was always going to Bombay. Like, I don't know why they don't call him.
No,
Bombay.
Bombay.
Guys, I don't want to get in any trouble. Just full
No, no.
disclosure, I did go to this place called Bombay Canteen. And speaking of food, you had to try the coffee rasgulla over there. It's
Oh my God, yes.
outstanding.
And
Yeah,
I'm going to take you for jalebis, which is something that most people are not familiar here. It's a Gujarati dessert. I was born in Gujarat. I was born in Rajkot.
I'm a Gujarati too, so I get
There you
it.
go.
Yeah.
Same show. No, that's Mahatma
Howard,
Gandhi's
the Gujaratis
area.
have the best weddings.
Oh
Yeah,
my
they
God.
last, who has time for 2-week weddings? Here's my
That's
thing.
what they're known. That's a great, right? Am I right?
I was thinking of going
Yeah.
on like these Hims tablets for my hair. Is it true that the food in Bombay is what gives you guys great hair, or is it the spice? Because I've never seen a bald person from Bombay.
No, you can lower. You can. There's a slider on the spice thing when every restaurant, so you can just adjust it. But it's
All
great.
right,
Great.
so
Just
the
go with medium
Ready.
spicy.
Should we
market-
should we touch on Swiggy, the IPO?
Yeah. So this is, we cover
Yeah,
there's a StockTwits India newsletter. If you go to StockTwits, you can sign up for the newsletter or hit me up. I've got like 200,000-300,000 people a day that. So we have StockTwits has one of the largest social media, if not the largest. You can't pay influencers in India, so every VC went into India and spent a lot of money to build the StockTwits of India, and they all failed because there's no business. We just run a lean, tight ship, and it's kind of powered by StockTwits USA. So we have one of the largest followings. People have gone brokerage crazy, right? I'm a small investor in a company called Raise, which is an options brokerage, which is growing tremendously. Why is it that the Indians love to speculate so much, do you think?
So two reasons, Howard. One of which is that there's been an explosion in the number of products that are there. So up until a few years back, you only had like a couple of main derivatives to trade in. So it was your Nifty, Bank Nifty. But now you have a new expiry or a new derivative product to trade every single day of the week. Plus, they've reduced the duration. So earlier it used to be monthly expiries. Now you have weekly expiries. So you have a expiry on a Monday, on a Tuesday, on a Thursday. Every single day there's something happening, and it's instant dopamine rush. The other thing is that it takes as little as just 20,000 INR, which would be less than $200 for you to trade in these options, and zero DT as well. So a lot of new people have come in. There have been some bad characters who've tried to position FNO and futures and options essentially as a get-rich-quick scheme with your zero DT products. And that's sort of driven a lot of people there. There is some bad news for the futures and options space because SEBI has come up with some new rules. SEBI is basically the SEC of India, the market regulator. And from 20th of November, they plan on increasing the margin requirements, reduce the expiries, like I said, from every single day to just 2 weekly expiries. So that's going to hit a lot of these brokerage guys, but hopefully that would cut down some of the speculation, because in the last 3 years alone, 93% of retail traders have lost money in futures and options. So only 7% of people even make any profit. And then those who make profit, out of them, majority of them, their annual profit after, accounting for transaction cost is under $2,500. So it's just not, worth it to play the game.
And so with playing the game comes IPOs. So let's talk about this hot IPO.
Yeah, so IPO flipping has become like the best part-time, like I was telling you before, hopping on this call. There have been some 80 odd IPOs in just the last 12 months or so, 83 if I'm not wrong. And the average holding period for these public issues is less than a week. So as soon as people get allotment, it gets listed at a premium. People just want to cash out. So if you apply through your account, your parents' account, your wife's account, your kid's account, basically 10 different accounts all together, you put in a large chunk of money, you hope and pray to God, fingers crossed, that you get even one lot, and then you flip it off to the next one. So that's become like a favorite pastime for Indians.
And so what's the deal with Swiggy? Is that one's coming public? That one's a big one. That's like the DoorDash of India or something like that.
Yeah, so actually the bigger player over here is Zomato instead of Swiggy. Swiggy is the number 2 player by market share size. It's about 43% of the food delivery business. Um, if you see both the companies, there is a stark difference. So food delivery is just 60% for Zomato because they've diversified, right? They've gone into something called a B2B supplies, which is their hyper pure business. They supply vegetables and food items to the cloud restaurants. And the other thing, which is the most important one, even for Swiggy, is quick commerce. So, up until a few years back, if you wanted something like batteries for your remote, you had to go down and get it. Today, you can order it from your smartphone, and in 10 minutes, a person will come to your house, deliver it to you with, all the other things that you can imagine, right? So from groceries to electronics, every single thing getting delivered to users in as little as 10 minutes time. In fact, last week when they launched the iPhone 16 in India, you could get it. You no longer need to stand like a lunatic, for over 24 hours on the streets. You can just order it on either one of these platforms, and you can get it at your house in like less than 10 minutes. So quick commerce is the biggest growth driver for both of these companies. Food delivery still remains the core over here.
Can we trade that one?
Delivery,
Can we trade that one in the US?
Yes, $30 billion. Zomato is about, you can see the 30 billion, and Swiggy is going to be about 15. And I believe you can trade Zomato.
Yeah, so Zomato's already listed. Swiggy is getting listed. On a comparison basis, Zomato has done far better than Swiggy. If you see the last 3 years, CAGR revenue growth's been 30%. Even their quick commerce business has been doing extremely well in this period. The only positive I would say for Swiggy is that they do charge fewer commission, very less commission compared to Zomato. So for them, the way to execute the quick commerce business would be to entice users with more and more discounts and promotional offers and get that business up as quickly as they can.
Last question about India in general. When is Swiggy coming public? When is this going to go? Do we know yet?
So most probably it will get listed by the end of this month, by the end of October. They're targeting a Diwali listing. As of now, what we know is that there are. As of now, what we know is that the IPO could be somewhere in the range of $1.25 to $1.5 billion, and they're looking at a post-listing valuation of somewhere around $6.5 to $7 billion.
And just one last really, really stupid question. If I want to play, I just like to buy these broad ETFs. If I want to go in and buy an ETF, an Indian ETF, I see a bunch of them. What's the one to do? Like, what's just the stupid, simple one to do for in the US? Anybody know?
I have a couple, but I'm it's in my portfolio, but I don't.
EPI, PIN are a couple. Then you've got the small cap India. There's a few. SMIN.
Yeah.
EPI would be the one.
I mean, not necessarily. It's okay. One.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. I can
walk you through the differences if you'd like.
No.
I think the thing is, it's had a great run. They've survived no TikTok, right? I think that's a playbook. If you look at Facebook today, and maybe Phil, you'll get to the chart eventually. I think this goes into why Facebook's hitting all-time highs. This is not a small market. And the playbook of what would happen in the United States if they killed TikTok, you just got the answer from India, right? India has Bollywood, Bollywood 2.0 or Bollywood mainstream India is, if Bollywood's as great as it is, which it is, regular Indian creators, Bollywood 2.0 is fantastic. And if Reels is good enough for them, you already know what's going to happen in the United States if TikTok goes away. So, kudos to the people. I'm indexed, so I own, luckily, I wouldn't own it otherwise. So I'm grateful I'm just indexed, because I don't think I would, as a non-Facebook user, I wouldn't own the stock. But I think you can see there's a lot of fuel still for, that is India's company in many ways. And Apple with 15% of the revenue moving from Foxconn. They want their iPhones, right? That's a status thing in India, right? Yeah. So, all right. So enough for now in India. Stay on. I'm excited that you're part of the crew. I think it's going to become, well, it obviously has been an important market. We haven't covered it that much, but hit me up and we'll get you set up on email, anybody, but go to StockTwits and it's a fantastic daily email on what's happening in India. Okay, next, Phil.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I was
No,
just
you're just saying, hi to Yash. Go ahead,
great discussion. I was thanking Yash for his input. This was great. Thank you.
Hang around, Yash, and just, we're going to make fun of Howie. We're going to, just talk some smack. So please hang around. Okay,
Yeah,
let's go to JC. Let's go to JC and talk some charts. There's so much happening in the market, inside the market now, that is so fascinating. I just want to begin, JC, right off the bat with the semiconductors chart, right? So you got the SMH and you got the SMH versus SPY, and you got this is not a head and shoulders pattern. Is that what's going on here? I mean, it's like, is a fake one with the oops, you did it again, and like, what's happening?
Yeah, I love this because it's just a nice friendly reminder to all investors that asset prices trend. We know the efficient market hypothesis was just a hypothesis. There are anomalies in the market that we can extract profit from. One of those anomalies is asset prices trending. They're not random. We know. We have the data, the white papers, all the PhDs. We know. So let's use that to our advantage. And a lot of the education behind technical analysis, starts with like indicators and reversions to the mean. And people are always trying to fight trends versus trying to embrace them. And these reversal patterns, like a head and shoulders top, is easy to remember. Oh, because it looks like a couple of shoulders and a head. It's easy to remember. People talk about it. So when you see one, it's like, oh my God, that's the end of the world. But the truth is that because asset prices trend, what oftentimes appears like a head and shoulders reversal pattern is actually the exact opposite. It is just a healthy digestion of gains before the next leg higher within that ongoing uptrend. You see it at indexes, you see it in stocks, you see it in sectors, you see it on a relative basis. This is just the latest iteration of a market leader in a bull market, not completing a top, just consolidating the gains from the last couple of years, as it probably should, right? Those are semiconductors literally tripled this bull market, tripled. And semiconductors could not even retrace 38.2% of that entire move higher. So people are talking about what a dramatic correction we've seen in semiconductors. It really hasn't been that dramatic at all when you put that into context. Now, has technology underperformed? Yes. Have semiconductors underperformed? Yes. But does that mean that the bull market is over? I don't think so. And the fact that they're stepping in and buying them, and they've been stepping in and buying consumer discretionary. So tech and consumer discretionary, that represents a large weighting in high beta in general, which has been an underperformer. If you start to see that high beta being rotated into, that is very constructive and perfectly normal for a bull market.
Go ahead, Michael.
And I just want to add.
I'd say, Michael, dip into Google LM. I mean, let's dip into Google LM and the 10 billion OpenAI, because this goes with this SMH chart, right? There is so JC gave the technical backdrop, and JC looks at prices, but you have to look beyond price of why that was a fake signal too. There is just this 10 billion was not that hard to raise. I know people that were in that data room and passed. Apple passed. Everybody had a look at it. It was 50-50. Some people made fun of it, but enough people put up $10 billion.
Yeah.
So you have that as a fundamental tailwind to this thing. Is very hard to bet against a tidal wave, just like the storm surge coming to Tampa. A bathtub weighs 1,000 pounds of water. A bathtub of water weighs 1,000 pounds. $10 billion weighs a lot. Okay, it's not just so much that they're funding potentially a bad business. It's that 10 billion leads to 20 billion more, right? Timing when that faucet this surge of money turns off is a powerful force, especially at technical points where JC's pointing out, where everybody's leaning one way, but the fundamentals are there behind this that they take over too. So walk through Google LM, which is an incredible launch, and walk through OpenAI's funding behind that.
Yeah, I want to.
That was my sister walking by. That was my sister, who's a famous TV star in Toronto, walking by. We're in Toronto. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, on the 10 billion, let me start with the 10 billion that OpenAI closed, and then also pivot a little bit to the semiconductors, and then come back to the broader NotebookLM, if I may. On the 10 billion, it's great that they did it. 6, 7 in equity, 4 in debt. It allows them to really get started increasingly more out of Microsoft's shadow and build their own infrastructure, data centers, etc. And think about it as an appetizer with all the products that OpenAI and the other peers, Google, Anthropic, Amazon, all of those have, Meta, etc. The pace, what we've seen this year in AI is just the dress rehearsal. We're going to see all of this really ramp in the next 2 to 3 years. I've talked about how NVIDIA and the semiconductor companies are essentially in a secular growth curve for everything from GPUs to memory to specialized packaged semiconductors, what's called CoWoS, which CoWoS. These are all buzzwords, but these are all going to be scarce for the companies like OpenAI, Microsoft. That are going from spending $200 billion this year to probably $300 to $400 billion next year, and higher numbers over the next year or two, at least after that. Why? Because AI is scaling. The more chips you throw at it, it goes up. The performance goes up 10, 20, 30 times. Jensen's been talking about how the new Blackwell chips are going to be 30 times faster on inference, which is the compute when users are typing questions, than the previous Hopper chips, which are still selling at $30,000 per. So semiconductors still have a lot of secular legs on GPUs, on HBMs, on a lot of the components that go into all these data centers. And the last thing I want to just touch on, because we talked about India and China, don't put China out of the game. China, even though the geopolitical news from Washington is more about chip curbs, the long term we're going to find when we look back, and I've written a lot about this, that China, this was the moment we will look back, that China basically got spurred by the curbs on the US and literally found its own way. Over the next 5 to 10 years, they are building their own semiconductor chips and plants and fabs like it's no one's business. They are hiring the best and brightest from TSMC, from Samsung. I'm in the weeds of this. Some of the brightest scientists are being hired by China, by SMIC, which is their TSMC. And so, and they're building huge nodes, not just in terms of the most advanced chips, but also the older chips. You know, our refrigerator, everything we have electronic, cars, all those chips have typically come out of TSMC in Taiwan. More and more of that is going into China. Because why? Because they have the infrastructure to do this, the top-down policy stuff. Yes, the US has the Inflation Act and the CHIP Act, and we're going to put a few fabs here, but the chips are mostly going to come out of Asia. So I just wanted to highlight that on the semiconductor side of the equation. So when we look at the Mag 7, only 2 of them have their bread buttered on both sides with China. One is NVIDIA, and the second one is Apple. The others also are companies like Qualcomm and Broadcom and ARM. Why? Because all of those chips are made in Taiwan, and increasingly the competing chips and architectures are going to be made in China. So I just want to point out that on a 10-year basis, we are forking the road on the types of chips, and that I think is potentially a disadvantage to us. Coming back to coming back to OpenAI, yeah, they're on they have launched in terms of as a big company. It's now Mag 7.5 is the way I talk about it, and they're on their way to being a Mag 8 in the next couple of years.
Well, Mike, can you come up with a new acronym for us, please? Please.
I will work on it. I'll make
worthy JC or Mike, come up with a new acronym.
No, I will
2 to 100. We got to do better. We got to do it better than Trends with No Friends, and we have to have our own macro for this semiconductor / consumer app boom that's coming. So we need.
It's just high beta,
and we can even do
trade.
And we can even do an ETF around it. So last thing I just want to say on NotebookLM, a lot of headlines on OpenAI this week, but Google is also with Gemini is just innovating, and they came out this thing called NotebookLM, which is a cool product that if you they've got 1 billion plus people on Google services like Gmail and Docs and Drive. You can take your documents, any PDF, and put your private data on Gemini in NotebookLM, and it will be your private. It will become your
JC, are
private.
you using this? Get your team on this. Get this thing is fucking a mind fuck. Like you can create a podcast out of anything.
No, and that's the thing. So they
By
had
the
a couple
way,
of
Yash, you should be creating an the Indian StockTwits Daily Rip. This should be going out in audio. It's
No,
really-
this is it, Howard, to your point, this is the mind-blowing thing. If you guys haven't tried it, everyone should try it. They were expecting NotebookLM to maybe have 10, 15, 20, 30,000 users when they launched the new features this week. But they also introduced the feature you talked about, Howard, which is that you can put up any text document now at URL, and it will literally generate two artificial people talking to each other like a podcast.
Wait till you see this. This will blow your
No,
mind.
it's crazy. And because of that, NotebookLM, instead of having 50,000 users, got 1 million. So in the next week or so, this may have a launch just like ChatGPT. I've already on one of my posts said this could be the next ChatGPT moment, and this time it's Google, and it will also be emulated by everybody else. But and this was a relatively junior engineer on the team, as I understand it, who came up with this idea, ran with it. It's literally like, Howard, if you remember Odeo, Jack Dorsey, who was a engineer on the team, came up with Twitter, and they pivoted the company. I'm not saying Google's going to pivot, but this is a big deal because
it's a big deal.
This,
like I'm using
this is a new interface to a language model that we've not seen, and it's going to take podcasts, into an abundance. In other words, when you have a lot of content that can be just generated by any text document, and then you can actually moderate and consume and tweak it and so on, it's going to be really amazing. One of the biggest things for creators.
JC, your team's going to look at this. The applications no one knows yet, right? We'll put the creative brains of
this is just the technology.
United States creators on this.
Howard, we use the AI. We use it every day. It's still nowhere near as good as the people. It helps.
No.
To get us to a starting point. We've been using it. We use it every single day.
Okay, good.
It's.
But using it is part of the thing. They're getting you to use it. Yeah. For you, it's not necessary.
It's got a ways to go for it to get.
No,
to
but think about dumping in your corporate information and getting your teams prepared. Anyways, I think it's.
We use the AI for meetings where it takes the notes. Like yesterday, for example, Straza said something really good, and the way he said it was really, really resonated. So we're able to go back to AI and literally print out exactly how he said it, right? And
you're a small business, but think about corporations that have thousands of meetings that go on, and they have to prepare for. Anyways, this is another newfangled attack.
JC makes a great point. I have a post called Science Projects, and basically every product you're seeing in AI today, whether it's for the enterprise or the consumer, it's everything that JC talked about that he's using, the notebook stuff we're talking about, the voice podcasting. These are science projects. They're just in the process of being productized to create real scalable products that millions and billions of people can use. So look at this picture over the next 3 to 4 months is what I'm saying. And I'm sorry, for 4 quarters or so, 1 or 2 years. These applications will get a lot better, especially as OpenAI goes from GPT-4 to GPT-5, which is supposed to be later this year, as Gemini from Google goes from Ultra to the next version of Ultra, as Meta goes to Llama 4, etc. So it's just getting better.
Hey, Michael, didn't you just write something about synthetic content and
Yes.
and what's going on there? I mean, just really briefly, just like,
Very
I mean,
briefly,
it's mind-boggling, like the personalization of computer-generated content from any person that and like just tapping into an individual's interest graph.
So it's literally what we've been talking about, which is converting text into podcasts and so on. Synthetic content is basically using these models to create personalized and broadcast quality content. The creator economy on YouTube, we talked about Reels, etc. Last year was $250 billion market, according to Goldman Sachs report. It'll be about $500 billion plus on last year's numbers in the next 3 years. Synthetic content, the ability to take these crazy scale models and generate content by creators, by businesses with their own data, etc. I think meaningfully expands this stuff to much bigger numbers over the next 3 or 4 years. So synthetic content is another reason why I'm so leaning into semiconductors, because last year when we were talking about this thing, all the compute that people are talking about was going to be used for training and inference. This year, there are two new synthetic types of content. One is synthetic data, and now synthetic content. So those through are new 4 legs that are going to drive giant use of semiconductors and data centers, which is why all these companies are going to spend billions of dollars, and a lot of it will go into NVIDIA's pockets.
Going back to the semiconductor conversation, there was one other chart, JC, that you posted that I wanted to make sure we touched on today. I think it's maybe the second most interesting chart in the world, and we'll get to the most interesting, is this SPLV to SPY chart. The volatility, low volatility versus the SPY. Just like, what does this chart mean that you're showing us? Consumer staples to SPY and SPLV.
Sure, throw it up. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, there are certain types of stocks that do well in bull markets. There are certain types of stocks that historically underperform in bull markets. And low volatility names and consumer staples are the most defensive stocks. It's hard to argue that healthcare is so defensive because it's such a large component in the S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average. This is in Canada. In the United States, these healthcare stocks have massive weighting. So this is not that defensive, even though there might be a little defensive tilt. Same thing with utilities. Utilities have been a leader this year. S&P's up 20%. Utilities were a leader in that 2003 to 2007 bull market as well. So how defensive are utilities? To me, it might be more of a interest rate situation. So for me, in my experience, and according to math, it's really low volatility and consumer staples that are the defensive areas. And in healthy market environments, these are the stocks that underperform. So when you see these types of stocks underperforming, that tends to happen in healthy market environments. And I don't know if you notice, look around, things are pretty freaking good. So I would argue this further reiterates that, yes, these are healthy market environments that we're in. And number two, if you are gloom and doom and you think, oh, the world's coming to an end and all that bad stuff that they tell you about, you're gonna need to see some relative strength in these areas to prove that right. Obviously, in addition to the prices of stocks.
Let's also this quickly. Let me just put some venture money on this. And again, I play one on TV because I'm a seed investor really only. But I can guarantee you that as much as stuff looks overvalued, and again, from any measure, you get what's the value, but you throw any value metric over this and you get nervous. So it's a million ways to make yourself nervous and never buy a stock. That's just the history of stocks. And I'm not going to argue with those people because at some point they'll be right. But there is so much money chasing private markets still. So that fringe money that could be buying semiconductors, that's probably the LP money that is pouring into AI at 150 billion and all the competitors at the margin should be going into the Fab 7.5 based on the prices that they're paying, right? So there is such a misallocation of capital that could be fueling public companies that are chasing the next Mag 7. Instead, they're going into these ridiculously priced private companies around the world. So there is all that money that would make it feel more like a bubble if the bubble wasn't happening in AI. And I think what you're going to see, Mike, and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm talking to a lot of VCs about this. This is one of those bubbles like the telecom bubble that will probably be looked at in the end. Oh, it was so obvious. But you know what's going to come from this telecom bubble? Like these NotebookLM products and the synthetic content that is just going to be a boon for Bollywood 2.0 and Hollywood 2.0 and the beehives and the punch-ups and the comedians and the entertainers and the creatives. So much like the telecom bubble was good for the first internet boom, this AI bubble is going to be good for the creator economy. I think Goldman says the creator economy is going to be $500 billion in
the next 2 years. Correct.
Anyway,
that was a last year's report.
And I think that's the number one thing that JC is talking about in a fundamental. That's the best fundamental kind of take I can put on JC's chart is that the price is showing you not just that, not just showing you that what JC say risk is on, but risk is being rewarded for being on because there's so much risk on in the wrong type of bets in the private markets. And so that money that could be really pushing these stocks higher, like Facebook's creeping. It hasn't happened in like 3 days. It's quietly creeped from $800 to $600. And really, we do a show called Trends with Friends, and Yash is the first guy here to really walk us through that Instagram, like, mouth to Trends with Friends. He's the first guy to articulate on a show with pretty smart guys. And you hear all this talk about Facebook and AI and Zuckerberg, but no one said the word, it's the Indians using Reels that are driving this. And so people are just misallocated is what I think. And a lot of these companies, while overvalued, have so much.
I just think people have been too conservative, and people continue to be scared. I can't imagine why.
They're actually not too conservative, JC.
It's not even that it's misallocation. They're just scared, and there's too much cash.
I think they're not scared enough. They're pouring money into illiquid assets at a time when the liquid assets are performing very well.
Yeah, but that's a small segment. We're talking about $110 trillion asset class in the stock market. The VC money, I mean, how much of a dent does that really put in? To me, it's the cash. It's the cash and the lack of exposure that investors have to stocks because they're scared. They had 2 bear markets back to back over a few years.
Two wars.
They probably consumed too much news and they're scared shitless. We have the data. We know that there is no euphoria out there at all. Quite the opposite. Surprisingly so, considering the stock market's making new all-time highs. The fucking VIX is at 20. Stock market's making new all-time highs. The VIX is at 20.
Has it done that before where the VIX is at 20 and stocks are at all-time highs?
That's a great question. I don't think so.
Nvidia's $3 from its all-time high. And I just want to give Michael and JC a shout out.
Good question, Howard. I think you're right. I don't think that's ever happened.
I forgot to ask you that yesterday before the show, but can we check that?
I don't think we have to. I think you nailed it.
And has there ever been a show of stock guys where where a group of 6 people are this fit? Look that up too, because any show Josh Brown's on, it tilts a little bit heavy. So I think we got him.
Hating.
I just want to drop a quick point on Reels.
That's not hating. That's not hating. Josh a little bit. He's enjoying the good life.
I just wanted to drop a quick point.
Is that your phone, Lindsay? Turn your phone off.
Yeah, who's dinging? Is that like you make a smart comment and it gets a ding?
The only thing that dings on my phone, embarrassingly, is my OnlyFans account. I don't know how to turn it on.
If I can just make a quick point on Reels, it was great to hear Yash validating the Reels usage in India. I had a post late last year. Zuckerberg has been making bank of Reels even more aggressively than TikTok. Last year, they did over $10 billion on advertising sales of Reels and those products ahead of TikTok. They hit 10 billion ahead of TikTok, just so you know. The one thing you can count Meta on is monetizing on AI and everything, because they're taking a lot of their engineer talent and creating huge amounts of advertising tools and technologies, just like we talked about NotebookLM and so on. They're creating a huge amount of advertising tech products that really help advertisers to monetize everything on all of these multi-billion user properties: WhatsApp, Facebook, Meta, Messenger, etc., around the world. So that's one of the reasons I think, Howard, to your point, Meta has crept up out of nowhere and gotten to over $1.5 trillion this week.
Howard, last week the S&P 500 closed.
I'm only saying if Zuckerberg got
19. So it was close. It's close, but I think that's probably the highest VIX close.
Yeah, there's something to be said in this. JC, write something up on this for me so I can promote it. But the other thing that we've never seen. I mean, listen, NVIDIA is 2.2 trillion. We'll get to Riley here in a second, and JC, you got to hop up. But and by the way, I think if we're going to do a movie and Yash could play your stunt double, JC, you know, because you've got families. So any kind of
He's like a more fit, better looking version of me, you know.
No, but we could gel his hair one direction. And he could
He
play
just
you in
needs a little bit of gel right here, and
He's got to get
good
that
to
Cuban
go.
Yeah,
accent going.
I need
He's
to
got
get
too
that
much of the
mohawk,
Indian
yeah.
thing going.
We're gonna have
Imagine what
to.
would happen in this country, though. If,
Less curry, more frijoles is what we need.
We're gonna have to get JC a StockTwits T-shirt though.
no, it'd be interesting if Zuckerberg got it was as flamboyant as Jensen Huang.
Yeah,
The coverage that Nvidia's gotten through this run versus Zuckerberg going from 80 to 600. I've never seen a company go to 1.5 trillion with as little coverage as Zuckerberg. So kudos. I mean, listen, kudos. What can I say? I'm not a Facebook fan. I'm not a social media fan, right? With AI. And by the way, there's a great there is a fantastic 30-minute pod that you can go listen to with Sam Harris about social media and bots, and you know, is bots free speech, and it isn't. A really good podcast about what's really bringing down, you know, social media. Everybody hiding behind free speech when an algorithm and a bot is not free speech. So Phil, I think you'll enjoy that as well.
Michael,
Anyway,
you're next, but I just want to get this in really quickly before JC goes.
Yeah.
JC and Michael, our September 10th program, when NVIDIA was getting crushed. Michael, your comment was, we're so early, you have to buy the weakness. And JC, if I remember correctly, your comment was, this looks like a double bottom. And if Michael is correct, this is a no-brainer. And, it's just like, we put this stuff out here and, you know, you see so many guys out there who, I mean, it's like a classic Kramer. When the market goes up, he gets really bullish. When the market gets killed, he gets really bearish. He's bearish at the bottoms. He's bullish at the tops. It's an anti-Kramer play. But I just want to give you guys kudos for maintaining objectivity based on what your true observations are, not your emotional whims, you know. So it's a beautiful thing. Go ahead, Michael. You had a comment.
I just want to make a closing out. I know we need to go to other things.
We're going to go on a little extra. We have a couple other things to cover. We're going to go on a little extra. So
I just want to tie a ribbon on the China, India, and now US thing. For a decade or more, all the big tech companies here have been chasing. They wanted to build what Tencent in China did, which is create WeChat, where over 700 million people in China do everything on WeChat in China. The ambition has been to create a WeChat in the US, which has been tough because the US is far more developed. But what has happened under our noses, just like Howard, you said, Meta just crept up. Meta also is creeping up on WhatsApp in India. WhatsApp in India is essentially as close to a WeChat in India that we have. It is, and why is that important? What is WeChat? Just to remind people, WeChat is essentially a mini mobile operating system on which everyone in the world.
CEHY for those.
We have that chart. We have that chart in the deck at 29.
And the two big winners in China over the last 2 decades, big tech companies, are Tencent and Alibaba for different reasons. And Tencent did it on this application called WeChat, which is essentially where everyone lives in China in terms of everything they do in their daily lives: buy things, sell things, look up content, play games, whatever. WhatsApp doesn't do all of those things, but they do a lot more. And Yash, correct me if I'm wrong, but ironically, if I look back over the last 10 years, everyone was looking for another 10 cent in the Western world. All of a sudden, we look back, and it's essentially WhatsApp in India that's the next WeChat outside China. And it happens to be owned by a US company. And
yeah, spot on, Michael. I think the only thing is that's missing for WhatsApp in India is the payment. So Google Pay is more popular over here in India versus how in China Tencent is everything. So right now they are building the payment side of things, but it's more for the smaller businesses. So it's the WhatsApp business for small enterprises that want to sell their products, boutique shops who are trying to monetize through that. But for the broader audience, it's still not there. Payment is still through Google Pay.
Agreed. I meant it. I meant the comparison in a holistic way. You're totally right. payments is a missing piece, etc. But what I was really talking about is the daily behaviors of people and their habits. And WhatsApp is totally integrated. When I was in India in February, everything was on WhatsApp. Everyone, you had to connect. You had to get anything. You had to be on WhatsApp.
It's wild.
Michael,
Okay,
do
let's
you
move
see that
on.
bleeding? Hold on, I have one question.
Go
if I
ahead. Go
may.
ahead.
Michael, do you see that behavior bleeding over into the United States? Like they're kind of using India as let's build a foundation and then
Constellation.
For WhatsApp,
Constellation.
behavior. Great question, right? For WhatsApp to have those behavior patterns in the US is very hard, because the behavior patterns on communication on social media are already super embedded within the other Meta apps, the Facebook and Instagram and Messenger and so on. So they bifurcated, and those are all billion-plus properties. It would take a lot to move people into WhatsApp here, and that's everything we're talking about are basically technologies and companies leapfrogging existing infrastructure in different parts of the world. The reason WeChat became WeChat is because there were no PCs, and there, and mobile phones were taking off, and WeChat was the one that caught lightning in a bottle. Same thing in India. There were no PCs when I used to go to India, and mobile grew up, and then Reliance, which is the big company we've not talked about, public company that is in all the India ETFs. They caught lightning in a bottle in terms of propagating huge amount of very cheap data access, which allowed these applications happening. So long answer to your question, yeah, WhatsApp. Zuckerberg would give his left arm to have a WeChat in the US, but
or a good mapping product. I mean, if we really think through, we talked about this before. I mean, losing that Waze deal puts another $500 billion in there in terms of attention. Not having Waze built into WeChat. That was a big miss. So, all right. So, trends with no friends, right, Phil?
We got one more thing, but Riley, stay with us. We're just going to do this one quickly. John Adams once said, "Facts are stubborn things, but our minds are even more stubborn." And so I think of that looking at this chart, 32. September 24, and this is a climate change thing, right? We're having these crazy hurricanes hitting the southeastern US. Wow. They're happening right now. We've never seen anything like it. The one in the Gulf now, the second one, Milton, is just a beast. And so I saw this chart the other day, and I was like, this is an interesting chart. And it's basically, this was the second warmest September ever charted in the global. This was the second warmest global. Last year was the warmest. So you could see the 23 and 24 just separating themselves from all of these other years down below. It's crazy. I mean, I
can say that Phoenix and San Diego are the hottest I can remember. I can say that people in Florida are taking notice. Granted, it's a Republican state and blah, blah, blah. And we can talk about the politicians, but they know they're voting against. They know something's up. 2 weeks in a row, they're packing up on the west coast of Florida. They know this is weird and they are scared. So it's a terrible, terrible kind of, blame it on whatever, but it's a terrible tragedy going on right now. And people haven't taken it serious enough. I mean, Sarasota could be storm surged away. That's a lot of wealthy people from Chicago, New York, and California buying homes that are going to be quite aware of all these numbers that you're sharing here, Phil.
And let's not forget what Helene did. I mean, it did what most storms don't do. They went hundreds of miles inland and wrecked North Carolina. That was a 1 in 1,000-year event. Yeah. In terms of the rainfall that had already happened, Helene dropping more, and the roads getting washed away, and so on. And it's going to take months. I mean, North Carolina is basically the next current Puerto Rico in terms of infrastructure. They're going to have to take months to rebuild, if not longer.
Yeah, so yes, coming in from the side, not from the south, just carry so much more water because Cuba doesn't break them up. So anyways, I spent 2 days in Florida. I haven't opened a weather app in 17 years. I go 2 days in Florida. I'm like a weather expert. I mean, that's all they talk about. So, but anyways, God, you know, I have a lot of friends moving, a lot of friends coming out to see me at Stocktoberfest from Florida. A lot of people moving their families to Fort Lauderdale or driving up the, I don't know, I heard there's like 4, 6, 7 million people being evacuated, Phil, which is a record.
It's insane.
Coming up one interstate. So hopefully everybody's careful. There's going to be some unintended consequence of this. You know who's ahead of this curve? The insurance companies. They're just not going to pay out, right? Like they are the true benefactor of global warming because they're just rewriting policies. And that's probably why insurance companies, that's probably been the global warming play that no one really, the hedge funds are probably sitting in that trade going, it's a hedge on global warming. Everybody thinks those guys are going to have to pay out, but they're never going to pay out. All right. So, Phil, good chart there.
Last but not least, Trends with No Friends. Riley Roseby, thanks for hanging out with us. You definitely raised the fit-o-meter of our crew.
Yeah, I just saw him. We had lunch. He looked good. He looks good.
Oh, dude, he's a killer. What do we got? What do we got today?
Pearlman program.
So I know
you guys are talking about big
You should hear about
tech.
his dating life. I just heard about his dating life.
We do not need to.
I had to take a cold shower. I had to take a cold shower.
Go Riley. Okay, let's do Trends with No Friends.
You guys were talking about big cap tech, China, and India today, but our Trends with No Friends name is actually a middle American retailer. We're looking at Tractor Supply. So Tractor Supply is a $30 billion rural lifestyle retailer. They have 2,400 stores across the United States and only 3,500 followers on StockTwits, which seems like an absurdly low number given how many Tractor Supplies I see. The stock is trading at an all-time high. This morning, it broke above 300 for the first time. And we can see the strength of the long-term trend if we go to that next chart, which is the weekly chart. And Phil, I have a question for you. So I think it was brought up in Reminiscences of a Stock Operator where they talk about buying a stock when it breaks those psychological levels of 100, 200, 300. How much weight do you place on these psychological figures? And like, as they climb these figures, does the meaning kind of degrade? Obviously 100 seems like a bigger deal than 200 and 300.
There's absolutely meaning. And it's just because humans give it meaning. That's what we do. We look for patterns. We look for round numbers. We look for even things. We look for things that cut the right way or that appeal to our senses in some way. So, of course, this thing gets up over 300 and starts to go, and you buy that 300 breakout, even though it appears random. You have a stop, number one, so you have your risk defined. And number two, there's absolutely people who are thinking about it that way. And you're right, 100 might be stronger. What's really interesting, to your point of how, given how many of these there are and how big its market cap is, I'm looking, there's been one message on StockTwits since like Friday or Saturday. So there was a message this morning, and the last message before that was on October 5th at 4:00. So nobody's focusing on this thing. Nobody's charting it and tweeting about it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like I said, relative to that.
Well, I mean, and it's already up $4 since this chart was taken. I mean, it's at almost 303 now, so 1% from.
Oh, so it is over 300.
300 break.
Yeah. So Trends with No Friends. You can follow along our email. I love the fact that it's just a small couple thousand email lists of loyal readers, and those are the kind of things that just no matter how many times you bang people over the head, they're going to look for Tesla. They're trading GameStop, DJT. They're trading Cisco. They're trading, obviously plenty of great traders are in these companies, but they're quietly accumulating and watching and checking out the business. All right, gentlemen, I think we've covered enough for this week.
And speaking of Tesla, we can talk about it next week. JC's gone, but he and I have this, ping pong match.
You're early in the clubhouse lead. You're early clubhouse.
I had a post on the Robinhood, Tesla's Robo Taxi Day on October 10th, which is next Tuesday, and
it's Thursday. It's this Thursday. I had it on the list. I had it on the list to talk about today. We just didn't get to it.
Oh yeah, same with Robinhood. Carry those over. Robinhood and the.
We'll talk about it next week.
Robinhood and Tesla. We'll talk about first thing next week.
All right, everybody.
All right, adios, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody for tuning.
Gosh.
See you, boys.
Riley, thank
Josh,
you.
great to meet you, man. Great
Good night,
talking to you.
Mumbai.
Adios.
Good night in Mumbai.
Thank you so much.